First thing, I really want to thank everyone for inviting. This is going to be a first public Skybox presentation for Hungarian markets. And today we're fully going to focus on a very interesting topic. And we'll speak really about the attack surface. I'm not sure if you've heard about this term before. But let's start with some interesting facts. Whenever I'm speaking, and again, I come from purely consulting background. For about 5 years, I had been exclusively doing risk analysis projects for many governmental and financial organizations. And about 8 years ago, I changed the side, moved to a dark side, and started working for vendors. And this is really a very exciting technology. And I'm sure you'll love it. So whenever I talk with CISOs, I typically ask them, okay, do you know what are the biggest pains in your organization? How does your network look like? And in reality, in most cases, they seem to be very embarrassed. They have no clue, right? With all the investments that have been made over many years, right, there is no confidence in the answers of chief information security officers about what's the most critical asset in the environment, what are the real attack vectors, what are the real live scenarios that could lead to a certain penetration and data loss, what are the most critical assets, etc. And in reality, well, market is telling us that 97% of breaches are avoidable through standard controls, and yet they keep on happening. So apparently something ain't working right in the information security industry. And there are a lot of vendors that simply come, and I'm sure you've met them, saying, well, you know, it's good, you know, to understand your problems, we see, and here is a new tool. Typically every 2 years they rebrand a tool to be called the next generation something, right? And here's a new tool that is going to help you, right? And it's the best on the market to protect you, right? And it might integrate with, you know, something, but in reality, right, nothing provides you a full visibility. Data is siloed. So endpoint security, you know, gives you a glimpse of your attack surface on the endpoint level. Firewall management system, you know, helps you manage your Cisco firewalls. The separate system helps you manage, you know, your checkpoint firewalls. Or Palo Alto management system would help you understand how Palo Alto IPSs are configured, right? How do you make decisions out of this mess, out of this, you know, separated data points? It's hard. So apparently, as you've already, or your organizations have already purchased a number of tools that you use in your company, right? You really have to have that expertise inside. And apparently, it doesn't work like this, right? You sometimes get the budget to buy a tool, but you don't get the budget to buy services for implementation or the training to get, you know, your skills right. And apparently, not only you lack the expertise to work with, you know, separate standalone products, but I'm not really talking about the cross-functional expertise, how things work together. And this is why we're changing. This is why we're changing this approach. And we speak about the attack surface, which is a visibility sum of all vulnerabilities in the network accessible to a hacker, right? And we provide answers. How does it look like, right? And we provide all the needed situational awareness. You cannot really fight the battle with seeing just, you know, bits and pieces of information. So if you remember, or if you've read the book, I haven't read it, you know, all myself, unfortunately, but there are certain very nice quotes. And it comes like thousands of years ago, and it says, the art of war teaches us to rely not on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him, not on the chance of his not attacking, but rather on the fact that we have made our positions unassailable. And, well, most probably all of you have seen several movies from World War II, and typically you see a lot of generals that gather in front of the big table. Or if you're fans of Star Wars, you typically, you know, look how battles are made in space. where you have, a bunch of smart people seeing something on the table with, key assets being moved. Well, in fact, this is what was happening really in the real battlefield, right? Napoleon won, a number of his famous battles because he simply went up the hill and he was able to see all the battlefield from the above and make certain good decisions. So the same methods are being now applied in military. Well, Skybox is kind of Israeli technology, so apparently there is a lot that has, the company has learned from the military field. But in reality, in the real battlefield, you typically see these, blue assets, which the circle ones with cross, they would be ground assets. The ones with arcs in squares would be an aircrafts, and you see enemies' positions and you see certain movements. This is something which provides you visibility, right? And there are different technologies being used, different assets, right? Different types of weapons. And only by having this visibility over your attack surface and the battlefield, the map, you as generalists can make wise decisions. What's the status of my security? Am I well protected? Where the enemy is heading? Which are my weakest spots? So apparently, if we take the same paradigm or parallel and look into our IT or ICT infrastructure, we would see that, again, we have really many layers of our attack surface. Apparently, you've already purchased a number of technologies. And here we speak about already existing firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, VPNs, which already meant to provide a certain level of protection. Then we speak about your existing network devices, be it routers, load balancers, or switches, which connect your network. And then you have, of course, your critical assets. Again, it might be different ones, servers, workstations, a segregated network, where certain parts are used for development, where third parties or partners might have access to. You have DMZ zones, etc. And apparently there is no technology which is perfect, so every piece has its own vulnerabilities that, well, could be very critical on some assets that you own. And apparently we have threats. So when we speak about threats, we typically speak about hackers, we speak about insiders, or simply not exactly malicious insiders, but people whose workstations are, let's say, infested, right, or which are used as a certain gateways to accelerate a multi-tier attack, right, and apparently you have malware. So how do we approach the proper methods or tools to protect this environment? And here's when we get back to more of the theoretical approach. In 2015, Gartner came up with a SOAR report, or SOAR technology stack, as they call it. And, well, it stands for Security Operations, Analytics, and Reporting Stack. They looked at the market and said, well, there are so many different stories around, the technologies, what they're supposed to do, right? What they're claimed to be doing. But in reality, right, a company, every customer has to understand the path or the journey they need to take in order to make that those security tools work together efficiently. So apparently a lot of companies, even nowadays, are on the detection stage, where they understand, certain facts. Vulnerability assessment tools, they kind of, let you have a glimpse of what's going on in terms of, vulnerabilities. What are the weak spots? And there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of those, right? Then we move into CM solutions, right? A lot of things are claimed. I've been related to CM market for 10 years right now. And I mean, it's a log management. Yes, there is a correlation, but basically it's all very reactive. You define, you detect, you can learn, but do you have, a lot of time to learn? And apparently you have to start assessing. There are thousands of events happening, there are thousands of vulnerabilities discovered, right? How do you get into the stage where you make assessments, where you start analyzing, where you start getting the fusion? I was at one presentation at our colleagues, Secure Trends, and they were kind of analyzing maturity model where it comes to, getting into certain next steps of being, proactive, being into predictive, etc. So apparently once you run your assessments, you understand the model, what's most critical, you can get and start planning your responses. Unless you've completed the step, there is no way you can make effective decisions and define proper response actions. No matter what everybody would tell you, no matter how many solutions are on the market that claim to be working on the response area, the decision is yours. And when you have to respond simultaneously at thousands of events, right, trust me, you'll be lost. You will never be successful there. And apparently afterwards you'd get into, okay, so let me explain a few terms. So SIR would be security incident response, TVM would be threat and vulnerability management, and SOA, security operations analytics. And apparently eventually you'd come into, certain mitigative actions. So Gartner predicts the following. And again, this is, as I said, the new technology and quite new concept for, I would say, any Central European market. So by 2019, 40% of VA budgets, I mean, we don't really have, I believe, separate vulnerability assessment budgets in our region. But anyway, it will rise from 5%, which is being spent nowadays, or was spent last year when the report was published. And that by 2019, 30% of mid-sized and large enterprises will leverage SOAR technologies to automate their security. So in general, why this is a good approach? Because it really, reaps certain, or helps you reap certain benefits out of the model. So you do consolidate data and extract actionable insight. Again, it's very much related to different technologies that you already have, right? But nothing is actionable. Things are very separated. And apparently you have to have tools. And this is not just approach and methodology. This is really something to do about the certain technologies that would gather all the data, right? And help you understand your attack surface and what's most critical, and apparently be more effective. So this is where I'm getting back to Skybox, because we purely focus on intelligence. Skybox is a operational security analytics platform. We are the fastest growing company in our space, with 60% year-to-year growth over the last 2 years. We already have more than 1 million devices and 10 million network assets that are being controlled or managed or analyzed by Skybox. We're the global company, headquartered in Silicon Valley. We have offices in Israel, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. And with more than 600 customers, we do operate now in more than 50 countries. And apparently, what is this platform? What it does? It really integrates with everything you already have in your infrastructure. Remember that slide looking at the different layers of attack surface. You have firewalls, you have network devices, you have your inventory tools, you have your ticketing systems, you have your CMDB systems, you have, Microsoft System Center, right? We do work with all these technologies and bring the data together. Not using any agents whatsoever. We simply read the configuration data and instantaneously provide you with the visibility of how things look like. And today at 4 p.m. we'll be doing a live demo. My colleague that flew from Germany, and he'll be actually doing a live demo of the system, how things work. So I do encourage you to actually take part of that second part of this presentation. And apparently we have five modules which cover vulnerability assessment, which cover threat management, when we look more of the predicting stuff or analyzing zero-day vulnerabilities. We do firewall assurance, we do network assurance, we do change management. So how does this platform work? So first thing, when you understand attacker, you think as an attacker, you would have to know access vectors. How would you access and how you could make that attack happen in the organization? So you have to know how your firewalls are configured, or how the firewalls of your victim are configured. How is routing done in the organization? So we read that data, we provide the recommendations. We don't care if it's Checkpoint, Juniper, Cisco, any other technologies. We simply get the data in and we say, okay, your firewalls are improperly configured. They don't comply to certain policies. They don't comply to certain best practices, right? And then we move extra to add to the same model network devices where you can start analyzing zone-to-zone access. And we would say, well, you know, out of your 5 firewalls that are in between point A and point B, right, there are a lot of redundant rules, there are a lot of overlapping rules, shadowed rules, some rules are not ever being used in the network, and none of the firewalls comply to the best practice from Cisco, Checkpoint, or Palo Alto, etc. So, you know, then we move into the change manager, where in case change is required in the organization, you could do the modeling, you would say, okay, if I give this change, how would that impact the organization, right? And the technology would tell you, well, if you make the change, if you grant certain access, if you make changes on your firewalls and network devices, it would render your organization incompliant to certain best practices or standards like PCI or NIST, and it would lead or it would open certain doors to vulnerabilities. There is no technology on the market right now except Skybox that can really analyze and do that for you. Vulnerability management, we don't care what you use. Qualys, Nessus, Rapid7, and Circle, we integrate with everyone. Even if you don't use any scanning technology, we would still show you vulnerabilities because we would deduct the information about the presence of those vulnerabilities based on the inventory information that we get from Microsoft System Center, Symantec Altiris, or any other technology that is used for building CMDB in your organizations, right? And it would show you. Yes, the accuracy is not 6 sigma, it's only 99.9%, but that's good enough without any scan, right? So in the end, you would make a decision, do I need a scanner, right? A lot of companies were, you know, or have invested heavily. So looking at our customers, already being quite young company, I mean, established in 2001, 7 out of 10 biggest financial institutions worldwide are our customers. We do work very closely with biggest service providers. So BT, Orange, they not use only our technology internally, but they use our technology in the data centers as part of their MSSP offerings. We do work a lot with government and defense and even private military contractors, right? 6 out of 10 biggest NATO countries are our customers. So that counts, you know, ministries of defense, secret intelligence agencies, etc. We're also good in energy utilities because we seamlessly integrate into the model the whole SCADA network. And again, different customers. So why do they choose Skybox? Because the problems that we solve are the same. And challenges or limitations the customers are facing, no matter if it's a Pepsi or Deloitte or Citibank, they still face the same ones. They all want to prevent attacks from potential threats. They all have, you know, tons of technologies that have already made investments into, right? And they're all limited with resources. Trust me, they don't have people. They're always looking for new people. They face the same problems as you do, right? And of course, they're losing with all the, you know, expansion of mobile things and different technologies. It's really hard to kind of grasp and have that whole visibility of what's in our network. So when we look at certain use cases where I typically state that there are certain challenges that our customers would face, and it would be the primary role of our partners like Euro1 to get in front of the customer and start analyzing without pushing any new technology. I mean, trust me, you have enough. You simply cannot use and make the good decisions with what you already have. So some customers, they tell, okay, we have no clue how a network looks like, right? So we help them understand network context. We normalize data from more than 90 vendors. As I said, we don't care what technology you use. In very rare exceptional situations, we're finding some devices which we don't support and we cannot bring into the model. But, you know, they're not, you know, very common. Then we move, once we analyze the model, we move into rule and configuration checks on the firewalls. If they're well configured, we do access path analysis. If any of you are technical and you work for a big company and somebody comes and say, you know, now we need to grant access for this gentleman that, you know, would be working to that server. and something ain't working. And trust me, in the network model, there might be 10 firewalls in between that prevent that access from being granted. It takes weeks to troubleshoot and find what's wrong. With Skybox, it's instantaneous because we know all the configuration of the network. So it's also about rule optimizations, which are shadowed, which are redundant, why are not used, change tracking. Compliance monitoring is not really a monitoring, it's instantaneous. Whenever we import configuration data of your firewalls and network devices, we instantaneously show you if it's compliant or not. And apparently, rule lifecycle with change request, integrated trouble ticketing system, which you might use, or might actually get the data outside into your service desk. In vulnerability and threat management, again, some companies say, well, we don't have a vulnerability scanner, we don't know which one we should choose. And even if we have vulnerability scanner, we end up with a very, very red, big report with all the vulnerabilities discovered, and how do we prioritize them? And typically, any VA vendor, and I know because I had worked for Qualys for 4 years, they would say, well, you can prioritize that based on the criticality. Well, it's an industry criticality. It doesn't apply to your organization, right? You find the vulnerability, but if it's never exploitable through the way or through your network, the way it's configured, why would you waste your time fixing that vulnerability? And when you have, let's say, hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities, you really have no clue, and you have 2,000 critical ones. You start fixing them. Well, majority of them, they're not even critical for you, because the way your network is configured, the hacker would never be able to exploit these vulnerabilities. So it's all about starting to analyze the attack surface, do the attack simulations. We even sometimes call our technology a virtual pen testing, because with all the visibility and then graphical representation, you can simply say, okay, can you show me what's access available from point A to point B? Okay, are there any vulnerabilities related given that access is present, etc. And apparently when you find the weak spot, so trust me, when you have hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities and you map those vulnerabilities on your network topology, you typically see that only 2, maybe 1% of those vulnerabilities are really associated with a certain attack scenarios, with a certain attack vectors, which could be exploitable by either outsiders, like hackers that are not inside your network, or by partners that have partial access to certain network segments in your environment, right? Or by malware. And apparently there is a full tracking. For CISOs, we have a different view. CISOs are not really very much, they may be interested, but they typically don't have a lot of time to get into the technical stuff. So for them, it's really important, the indicators of exposure. So this year we released a product which is called, again, it's analytics. It's called Skybox Horizon. It was announced as the most innovative product of the year by CS Magazine. And again, based on that technical model which we built and which network and security operation guys work with, we provide a different insider overview for CISOs with risky access rules on the firewalls, with the vulnerability exposure, vulnerability density, with new vulnerabilities and unsecure devices. So how does the product really look like? And I said we'll do a live demo this afternoon. So this is a Skybox Horizon. So as you see, it's not only circles. Circles are really, they represent the size or the number of the assets inside that network. If you drill down, for instance, as you see in the middle screen, you would see separate devices, and every device is analyzed using those 5 indicators of exposure, or sometimes I call indicators of risk. And apparently, what it shows, it helps you visualize your entire attack surface from multiple perspectives, and display data in formats useful to security and business-oriented stakeholders. It's not technical. Everyone can understand what's bad, and sometimes I say that it's either the dashboard of fame or shame of the Chief Information Security Officer, right? And apparently there is no organization that has everything, in green. So how does the model really look like? The implementation of Skybox typically takes a couple of days only. We don't deploy agents. You simply need to, provide a server or, a virtual machine where we deploy our virtual appliance. We would connect to all your firewalls and start pulling the data, let's say every 5 minutes or every hour, right? Configuration data with read writes. And we would build you the model. Same goes with network devices. And everything will be included in the model, which would be live and which would be updated based on the regular intervals. No agents whatsoever. Then you would start analyzing, okay, if I want to get access, or what kind of access is available from point A to point B? We would show you how things are configured in between. Are they compliant with NIST 840 or with the best practices that come from Cisco, Checkpoint? Everything is by default there, instantaneously showing you if you have any rules on your firewall, which rules are shadowed, which rules are redundant, etc. So this might be a small network. This is one of our largest customers. And you can imagine now, if you're an IT guy and somebody comes and says, edvinas, well, there's a new employee right here, and he needs to get access to this computer because he'll be developing something on that computer. He needs a remote access and only 3 ports open. And it's like, okay, looks interesting. What do I do? Where do I start to troubleshoot? Or if something is not working, I cannot access that point right there. What's wrong? You're IT, you should know, right? What do you mean it takes, 3 weeks to discover? Because literally, without the technology that gives you the full visibility, right, there is no way you can analyze by just tapping every firewall individually. And in your environment, apparently you have a bunch of technologies, which we all support, and join them. So, this is how, again, the interface looks like with, the changes made in the firewalls, which are always visible. You can analyze zone-to-zone access by very simply verifying if, different network segments have the proper access, that only port open is 80. I mean, you simply run the query and you get that. You said that your partners should only have access to your deployment servers on port 80, 8080, SSL, and port 22. Easy, right? Takes seconds. No matter if there are 100 firewalls in between. Nobody from the internet should have access to financial servers. You can check that instantaneously. Then you would do in compliance. I said it's automated. We'll do a live demo, so you'll see that nothing is required. You simply install the product, and you see that. Yep. So the network is always live, visible. Change management, which is embedded into the product, would allow you, if certain access is requested, to make sure that every technical aspect of that change, from a business perspective, from a risk management and compliance perspective, is considered. So if you're asking somebody, give me FTP access to that server, right, you fill in the request, technical details would be derived, how many extra changes and on which network devices and firewalls would be required to complete that change. Risk assessment would verify you if this is granted, what compliance issues you would have, and which vulnerabilities would then become exploitable on the network, right, in case this access is granted. So it really gives you the full picture. In terms of vulnerability content, as you would assume, we work with every scanner, well, most probably almost every scanner, but every popular scanner on the network. We aggregate more than 20 resources. We really have the biggest database on the market. So anything, even if you don't use scanners, we can, as I said, correlate or get the data out of your inventory tools. And in many cases, when you end up with vulnerabilities, right, you can really focus on the ones that pose the highest risk based on the criticality of your assets. And sometimes these are not critical ones defined by the industry, but rather by yourself. In attack vectors, we would provide you a graphical view based on the same model of how hacker could penetrate your network by highlighting a most likely path. Every path gives you the routing table of the access, how attack would be conducted through which ports, and it would show you which vulnerabilities would be exploited on your network, and apparently you can click on the link later and fix those vulnerabilities. So it really helps to deduce the number of vulnerabilities to just 1–2%, which would be attackable or exploitable given the context of your network configuration. So, you know, we're really changing the game here. And as I said, it's very exciting technology, right? We don't make promises that it's a new tool that will, you know, get you protected from advanced persistent threats and all this stuff. No, you have enough tools, start analyzing what you already have, and then use a Gartner's SOAR approach to make right decisions, how to move from detection, how to move to and reach the mitigation phase. So Skybox, we do provide complete visibility with a lot of integrations that we offer. It's a very broad platform, and it's literally, you know, one platform, one solution that analyzes vulnerabilities, that scales to very large customers that have hundreds of thousands of network devices. And yeah, we do work, we do provide really good support, as everything is typically based in Israel, so almost on the same time zone. So I would like to thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to seeing you later at 4:10 at the technical presentation. Thank you.